Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and before we get started on tonight's story, I'm going to let you know about tonight's sponsor, Freedom's Twilight. Freedom's Twilight is a game that's just launched on Steam, and I'm going to be playing the trailer for you right now. Summoned to a strange dark fantasy world of the mist, you will encounter both natural and supernatural obstacles as you explore, collect, craft, learn, build, and survive the fog that's blanketed the realm. Fight back the abhorrent creatures of darkness, and build yourself a place that you can call home. I've been talking to the developer for this game for a little bit. It looks incredibly fun. What he's told me is there's almost 400 hours just in the initial launch of gameplay. So if you guys like pretty dark fantasy stories, incredible settings, and some pretty good action gameplay, then I strongly suggest you check out the game. You can find it in the link in the description down below. And now, on to tonight's story. My newly engraved nameplate wasn't the only surprise I received that Monday morning. While Casimiro was recovering at home from our incident with Harry, my partner would be everyone's favorite hitman turned used car salesman, Victor Bonicelli. Vic was waiting on the sidelines while everyone congratulated me for earning my name, looking like an unusually husky medieval warrior in his chainmail and Kevlar bodysuit. When the crowd thinned out, he clomped over in his brand new leather boots and gave me a hearty slap on the back. I stumbled forward a bit and let out a soft oof sound. Vic beamed at me and hollered, "Good on ya, Billy boy. Seriously did a great job in there, kid. Most guys wouldn't have the balls to hug a Sasquatch. They're not Billy fucking white bread, are they? I knew I did right by hiring you. Had a feeling you were a good kid. Real stand-up guy." I motioned at his outfit and asked, "You filling in for Kaz?" "Yeah, I got no choice," Vic sighed. "Can't just go down to a temp agency, get yourself a new caretaker, that's for sure. Go suit up, kid. Not the suit you were using for the undead, the other one. You're gonna be working in the aviary wing. Don't forget the bird's seat." I gave him an incredulous look and asked, "Are you being serious? Because it would be a nice change of pace if I didn't have to fear for my life today." "Nah, I'm just fucking with you," Vic grinned. "These things don't eat no bird seed. They eat meat. More importantly, they'll eat you if you're not careful. No joke. Now hurry up, put on your chainmail, Billy. We got work to do." The service tunnel was a bit different than what I'd seen in the other two wings. On the other side of the security door, there was a flight of concrete stairs that descended a good 20 feet below the ground floor of the building. The aviary exhibits were partially underground so the creatures could have more room to fly around. As we walked down the steep flight of stairs, Vic told me there was only 2 cryptids currently residing in the aviary wing. He had a thunderbird, and as his words, just a mid-sized forest dragon, not one of them big bastards from the mountains. To be clear, I wasn't very stoked about having Vic as my partner. He was cheerful and personable. He was also a homicidal maniac. In fact, he was best known in certain circles for his expertise in the art of sawing apart corpses for easier disposal. Vic would bury me in the woods if he ever suspected my secret plan for a zoo. He'd shoot me dead where I stood and not even blink. With this in mind, Victor Bonicelli was also known to be very good at peering into a person's heart and seeing their true intentions. Salvatore had told me, Vic's a fucking bloodhound. And I believed him. When Vic looked you in the eye, you could almost feel his gaze piercing into your brain. All in all, I was pretty fucking nervous to be in close proximity to him day in and day out for the next couple of weeks or so. I smiled and nodded as Vic prattled on about the dragon, and I silently wished Kaz a speedy recovery. "A trank gun won't penetrate those scales," Vic was saying, "so you gotta hit it in the underbelly. You paying attention? I don't like repeating myself." "Yeah, the underbelly," I repeated, and I pantomimed firing a rifle. Thankfully, I hadn't caught much of what he just said, but I heard enough to know the dragon was actually part worm, and its relatively thin wings weren't very good for flying. "I wish I can get my hands on a mountain dragon," Vic grumbled. "I'll tell you, those babies are something else. Can't be done, though. I don't think it's possible to trap one. It's housing the thing that's the problem. I need to build a Pyrex domes 4 feet thick, 200 feet high. And crunch the numbers is not doable. I'm not. So I'm stuck with this feisty little fucker here." We were standing in front of a typical exhibit entrance, replete with pneumatic locking bolts and sturdy porthole windows. I peered through the glass and saw a woodland scene that was reminiscent of Harry's habitat, but not quite as dim or densely forested. There was a lizard-like creature laying in the clearing in the center of the room, basking in the morning sunshine. Looked a bit like a crocodile, and a bit like an anaconda. Just a pinch of bat thrown in for good measure. I breathed. Oh, that's really fucking cool. Is it intelligent? I mean, aren't dragons supposed to be, like, wise? Or something? Vic snorted. Nah, forest dragons are pretty dumb. And worms, shit, ain't even dumber. It's a hybrid, so it's a bit smarter than your average worm, but it's a bit stupider than your typical forest dragon. It can sort of understand what you're saying most of the time, but it can't talk back. Can't read or write, nothing like that. It's a temperamental bastard, too. Anyway, like I was saying earlier, after grabbing a cattle prod out of the supply room before you go in, the dragon might start flapping around a bit to intimidate you. Don't pay it no mind, it can't fly good. Not good enough to lift you up in the air. If it gets too close, give it a zap. Show it who's boss. Vic looked at me patiently for a few seconds, waiting for me to go do something. I looked back at him with growing confusion. Finally, Vic let out an irritated grunt and said, What are you on strike or something? Look at the fucking cattle prod, dummy. Yeah, that's right, in the supply room over there. Jesus, Mary, Joseph. Am I talking to myself over here? I protested. The way you worded it made it sound like nobody had to go in there just yet. Jeez, man. You really... Vic held a finger to his lips and pointed at the supply room across the hall with the other hand. I promptly shut up and scurried over to fetch a cattle prod. Vic called out, Hey, grab two! One for each of us! I came back with a disturbed expression and a cattle prod in each hand. I asked, Why is there a walk-in freezer full of dead goats in there? Vic shook his head at me and muttered, What do you think a dragon eats, genius? Think they eat hamburgers and hot dogs? No, they feed them goats, chickens. Maybe a deer now and then for some variety. That we don't feed any live prey, because that could be dangerous. If forest dragons don't got no magic, they can't breathe fire, they don't hoard any treasure, they can't grant you a wish, none of that shit. And just overgrown lizards that can fly around a bit, but Donnie catches a hoof in the mouth, that could be a serious injury. It's a safer bet, just chuck him in there already dead. I said, okay, sure. I mean, that makes sense. This was a lie. Literally nothing about the zoo made any sense. Not one bit. But I wasn't about to say that to Vic. I steeled myself for yet another encounter with the unknown and asked, So, what do I need to do in here? Mostly you just gotta pick up the bones and the piles of shit, Vic said casually. It's a biological creature just like the goblin. He eats shit's cycle of life. The Sasquatch buries his shit and the rest of them just crap on the ground, leave it there. It's the reality of being a zookeeper, I guess. What you gonna do? Donnie the dragon, I murmured in a bemused tone. Why do you keep referring to Donnie as an it? Vic chuckled ruefully and said, Well, I actually thought all forest dragons were boys, whatever, but as it turns out, I was incorrect. They produce asexually, as in once every 100 years or so, they lay and fertilize their own eggs. It's crazy, right? I've been told it's probably an evolutionary trait, because these dragons, geez, they can't friggin' stand each other. They won't tolerate any other dragons in their territory. They see another dragon, it's probably going to be in a fight to the death. Nature's pretty hardcore, I agreed. Okay, so I go in, I pick up the bones and poop. Does it need a frozen goat today, or... Nah, Esmeralda dumped one in there a few days ago. Dante usually lets the goat get a bit ripe before it chows down. Denature in the proteins of some decay makes it easier to chew. That's gross as fuck, I grumbled to myself, and I stared blankly at the keypad beside the door. I was too distracted by my unease with Vic's presence to remember the code. He squeezed my shoulder and asked, Well, didn't you see the memo? Got changed to 5395 this week. Trying to tighten up security measures and all that. Anywho, we keep a shovel with some garbage bags right near the door. Get scooping, Billy boy, don't worry. I'll be watching out here like a hawk. Old Vic's got your back. I muttered, thanks, Vic, and I entered the habitat. It smelled like a combination of cool, dank forest and big, stinky lizard. Donnie the dragon appeared to be having a snooze. This suited me just fine. Now that I was on the other side of the door, Donnie looked a hell of a lot bigger. He was curled up, nose to tail, a lump of a reptilian muscle the size of a buffalo. He was covered by an interlocking shield of triangular scales, each one of them ending in a savage-looking point. Donnie's tail was 10 feet long and thicker than a telephone pole at its base, tapering down to 4 or 5 inches of rib-shattering devastation near the tip. It ended in a spiky protrusion that was clearly designed to pulverize bone and crack open skulls. I give the industrial-strength cattle prod in my hand a skeptical look and clipped it onto my utility belt. The dragon gave me a sleepy glance and closed its eyes again. It seemed completely unconcerned with my presence. I started tiptoeing around with my garbage bag and shovel, quietly playing treasure hunt for piles of dragon shit. There were also the scattered remains of past meals lying here and there on the earthy floor of the habitat, and they stank to high heaven. I was struggling not to gag. After about 20 minutes, I was finished scouring the habitat. I had collected 3 garbage bags worth of dragon refuse, and I was more than ready to leave. The dragon had quietly napped in the sunlight for the duration of my visit, basking its exposed belly without a care in the world. It seemed my very first encounter with a dragon was going pretty well, all in all. I was pretty surprised. As I was dragging the putrid garbage bags over to the exit, Vic turned on the intercom and said, "Hey kid, get your cattle prod ready. Donnie's giving you a look." I looked over, and sure enough, the dragon was now awake, and it was giving me a cold, considering stare. It heaved itself up onto its feet, let out an enormous, jaw-cracking yawn, then started ambling towards me with its tail swishing back and forth through the air. I dropped the bags and scrambled for the cattle prod on my belt. I held it up and called out, "Take it easy, Donnie! I'm already on my way out!" The dragon frowned at the cattle prod and said, "I'm not going to eat you. Stop embarrassing yourself." I did a double take and called out, "Hey, Vic, did you hear that?" "Hear what?" His voice crackled over the speaker. "Come on, quit fucking around and get out of there." "He can't hear me," Donnie said. "I'm speaking to you in your mind. Please don't make a scene." I sputtered, How come Vic doesn't know about this?" Donnie settled back on his haunches and let out another yawn. "He doesn't know because I never told him. Look, we don't have much time, so be quiet and listen. I know what you're planning to do, and I'm on your side. When the time comes, release me from this prison, and I'll help you bring it all down." I stared at the dragon in shock. I let out a shaky breath and whispered, "How do you know about any of that? I've never even seen you before." "Oh, I know all kinds of things," Donnie assured me. "Be careful to keep your plans a secret. Victor isn't a clever man, but he has the gift of insight. He can look into a man's heart and see his true intentions. Keep a lid on it until you're ready to act, or he'll kill you." Vic turned on the intercom and hollered, "What's going on in there, kid? You have a conversation in there? Trust me, this ugly fuck don't understand a single word you're saying. All I can do is eat and shit. Now, come on, let's go." The dragon murmured, "When the time is right, come for me. Be very careful, Billy Whitebread. You live in dangerous times." I exited the habitat wearing my best poker face. Vic threw up his hands in exasperation and said, "Don't get it riled up, Billy, or you might regret it. Overgrown gecko has a bite like a hydraulic press. I seen it eat. There's a big crunch, and half a goat's lying there on the ground. Chews it up, bones and all. It's fucking horrifying to watch." "Sorry, Vic," I apologized, and I avoided looking him in the eye. I was trying to make friends with it, and I was saying stuff like, oh, you're such a good dragon, that kind of thing. Yeah, don't waste your breath, Vic grunted. Not a dog, it's a big fucking lizard. It don't care about you, right? Come on, let's go check on that Thunderbird. I asked him, isn't a Thunderbird supposed to be like a demigod or something like that? Nah, it's a bunch of horse shit. They're just birds. I mean, they're really big friggin' birds, and they can kill you, but they're just birds. I swear, people are always saying to me, a Thunderbird's a god or something, right? And I'm like, if it's a god, why the hell is it locked up in my zoo? I swear, so much misinformation going on around here, Billy. I can only shake my head, you know what I mean? People believe anything. I burst out into a long, shaky fit of giggles. He frowned at me and said, what's so funny? What did I say? I just shook my head and blurted, let's go, Vic. I want to see this big freaking bird. Bird's a word, he grinned. We both started to laugh. Vic was laughing because he was a darkly jovial kind of guy, and I was laughing to prevent myself from screaming. All I wanted to do was jump in a car and get onto the highway and speed off into the sunset. Truth be told, I kind of wasn't holding up so great anymore. The pressure of all the constant weirdness was starting to take its toll. The thrill of this completely insane and top-secret life was wearing thin. I wanted to get off this wild ride and return to my normal, boring little existence. But there was no feasible way to go back. I was doomed to see this situation play out until the end. I went to bed exhausted, and I fell asleep immediately. At some point during the small hours of the morning, something compelled me to open my eyes, and I let out a startled squawk of terror. There was a circle of 8 sprites faintly glowing in the impenetrable darkness above my head. They were hovering in the air and studying me with blank expressions on their tiny faces. I tried my damnedest to jump up and run for my life, but I was stuck. The weight of their collective will had me pinned to the bed. I was helpless. Finally, one of them turned to the others and said, I disagree. It's not intelligent. And one shook his head and warbled, Nay, the poor thing's not stupid. It's only ignorant. I believe it thinks and feels as we do. There was a burst of high-pitched and virtually incomprehensible dialogue between the 8 sprites, which ended with the first sprite yelling, Silence! I'm the king. I have the final word in all deeds and matters. Human, speak on thine own behalf, and be judged accordingly. Art thou pure of heart? I sputtered, yes, sure I am, pure as gold. The sprites all whirled together like 8 spinning tops, all of them making their high-pitched, unearthly trilling sounds as they did so. When they finished with the twirling and trilling, the king of the sprites floated down until he was hovering just a few inches away from my face. He jabbed the tip of my nose with a tiny finger and growled, I have revealed myself this eve with the gravest of doubts in my heart. I do not believe you're worthy of my assistance. Dost thou plead thy never-ending fealty to I, Mercus Honeydew, king of the sprites, thine fealty or thine head? Which wouldst thou pledged unto me? Fealty? I squeaked in terror. Definitely fealty. The king's tiny lips twitched in a brief smile. He drifted ever closer and murmured, Follow the thread, mortal, and take heed. Can you see? You must beware the one who walks in the moonlight. The light is close to thine heart. Thine heart! The others chanted in unison as they all engaged in another manic twirl to emphasize their point. I stammered, What thread? I can't see anything. God, I'm so lost over here, it's not even funny. The king floated up to the others and threw his head up in frustration. Do you still believe it is intelligent? He demanded. We have shown it the way, yet it still cannot see. Why should I care about the fate of this creature? It is no difference to me than a dung beetle or a pine cone. The other sprites buzzed their wings and trilled amongst themselves for a few moments. They all nodded in agreement, and one of them drifted closer to King Mercus. It performed a humble bowing gesture and then said, Intelligence cannot be quantified by only one set of measures, my lord. It may be a simple creature, but it is clearly capable of reason, and it is pure. And what of it? The king demanded. Self-awareness means bugger all. This lowly lump is hardly more than dirt and clay. Why should we interfere with its fate? Because it wishes to release the prisoners, the other sprite answered quietly. Without our assistance, it will surely fail. I croaked. How does everyone know that? I was violently shushed by all 8 of my tiny intruders. King Marcus sighed. Very well. He floated down to stand on my chest. He pulled out a sword that must have been all of 2 inches long, and he lightly tapped me on either side of my nose. Marcus cleared his throat and called out, Hear ye, hear ye! In return for thine fealty to the king of the sprites, and thou shalt be granted our assistance. Go forth into the world and walk without fear, puny mortal. For thou art shielded from all manner of evil in the order of I, Marcus Honeydew, king of the sprites. Marcus sheathed his sword with a flourish. It favored me with a benevolent smile. His hands planted on his hips in a stately fashion. I stared back at him awkwardly for a few seconds, then I murmured, I'm actually not going to leave because, I live here. Maybe you guys... Marcus clapped his hands to his forehead and exclaimed, Oh, right, of course. My apologies. The king floated back up to join his subjects in the air above my bed. He called down to me, Rest easy, mortal. Be you a fool or a wise man, you have my protection. The sprites twirled together as one and shot upward in a blur of movement. They passed through the ceiling like it wasn't even there. And then, they were gone. I was left feeling like a boneless puddle by the magical force the sprites had used to hold me still. I urgently needed to take a piss, but getting out of bed was a tall order for someone with no bones. It took me several tries before I could sit up and heave my legs over the side. I held myself up with a towel rod as I did my business, and then I lurched back to bed. I wondered if Len was out there on the street watching me, listening from behind the wheel of his car and deciding it didn't matter anymore. I was under the protection of His Majesty, Marcus Honeydew, king of the flying Barbie dolls. I had a cigarette in the dark, watching the smoke drift towards the open window in the moonlight. My nerves were screaming, but my body was exhausted. I dropped the butt into an empty Coke can, curled up into a defensive ball, and fell headfirst into the abyss. I woke up once again with the feeling that I wasn't alone. I opened my eyes to a disorienting wash of morning sunlight. There was a large figure standing in front of the window. I squinted against the light, still half asleep, and I saw it was Vic. He rumbled.
That was good to you, kid. Is this how you repay me?
I fell out of bed in a tangle of blankets. My mind was a thunderstorm of terror and panic. I held out my hands in supplication and gasped, I didn't do anything, boss. I swear I didn't do anything. Vic stared at me with a grim expression, slowly shaking his head. Then his lips curled into a grin. He snorted out a strangled laugh and yelled, Come here, you're killing me over here. It's a joke, Billy. Don't shit yourself. You should have seen your face, though. Are you sure you didn't? You got something to hide? I don't know. That look was pretty convincing. I moaned, Stop it. Oh, stop it. Okay, just stop. I can't believe you. That's fucked up, Vic. That's just wrong. It was wrong. It was the wrong thing to do. Vic flapped a hand at me and said, Come on, don't be a little girl. You ain't dead, so you ain't got nothing to complain about. He ambled out the door and called over his shoulder, Go take a leak, have a shower, all that morning stuff. Make it snappy. I'll be waiting for you in front in the car. I'm gonna take you out for a nice breakfast, kiddo. You need to put some meat on those bones. I watched him leave with eyes like saucers. I was too close for comfort. Way too insanely motherfucking close. There was a horrible second or two where I was sure I was a dead man. I was so completely sure of it. Saw a gun in his hand that wasn't actually there. I couldn't stop shaking. Now he wanted to take me somewhere for breakfast. What a guy. I found Vic out front, sitting in an illegally parked Mercedes-Benz sedan. He was smoking a cigar and listening to a news report in an ear-splitting volume. I jumped into the passenger side and shouted, This is a great ride, Vic! Could you turn that down a bit, please?
Oh, sorry, kid. Yeah, you ready to start off the day, right? The breakfast's the most important meal. Doctors and whatnot, always say that.
Vic wheeled away from the curb with very little regard for oncoming motorists, and he gunned it down the street. I clutched the armrest as he weaved like a madman between slower-moving traffic. He dialed in an oldie station and cranked it up to 11, alternately cursing other drivers and warbling off-key along to Richie Valens.
Good music,
Vic bellowed as he turned it up even louder.
You young kids, you don't got no good music these days. Sometimes I turn on the MTV and I'm like, the hell is this shit? I'll tell you, things were a lot better when guys like me were running the music industry.
Yeah, those were the good old days, I yelled back. So where are we going? You're not taking me somewhere fancy, right? Vic hollered.
Yeah, it's the fanciest joint in town. We're going to fucking McDonald's, kid. Do you think Victor Bonicelli eats crepes and caviar for breakfast? Hell no. I like to get 2 kind of those egg hamburgers and a hash brown. Sometimes I get the hot cakes and sausage and mix it up. I told you already. I ain't no fancy pants over here. Only expensive thing I truly enjoy are whiskeys, cigars, and high-class broads. I never cheap out on one of those things.
We pulled into the lineup at Mickey D's, and my stomach immediately started to growl. I'm not usually hungry first thing in the morning, but I don't have fast food vapors. Wafting into my nostrils. I'm not usually hungry first thing in the morning, but I don't have fast food vapors wafting in my nostrils either. True to his word, Vic got himself 2 of those egg hamburgers and a hash brown. I followed his lead and we both got a large coffee. Vic parked the Mercedes across 3 parking spots, and we dug into our breakfast as Eddie Coutrin sang about teen angst and the summertime blues. I turned to Vic and said, "You know, this is a great idea. Thanks for breakfast, boss." Vic beamed at me with crumbs and flecks of eggs on his lips.
Hey, don't mention it, kid. We gotta fatten you up a little, you know, you're skin and bones over there. Maybe I'll take you over to the deli later this week. You can get a pastrami on rye, meet some of the... Hey-o. Who's this I see? Is that,
Vic was staring at a heavy-set middle-aged man in a pair of blue coveralls. He was approaching a white cargo van with a drink in one hand and his keys in the other. Vic narrowed his eyes, and his smile collapsed into a snarl. He popped open his door and said,
"Wait here, kid. Give me a minute."
He hustled over to intercept the other man as he was unlocking his van. The man looked over his shoulder as Vic approached, and his broad, ruddy face went pale as milk. Vic snarled,
"You have a good breakfast, cocksucker?"
Then he closed the last few steps between them at a dead run. The target of Vic's wrath dropped his drink and raised his hands over his face. He had time to shriek, "Victor, no!" Then Victor blasted a punch through his flailing arms, hitting him in the mouth with brutal force. The guy bounced off the door of the van and fell to the ground. Vic proceeded to relentlessly kick him as he curled up into the fetal position, grunting in pain as Vic's Adidas running shoes thudded into his legs and kidneys. Vic panted,
"The money, you fat fuck!"
And he stomped on the helpless man's ankles, making him screech in agony. He tried to worm his way under the van, but Vic grabbed his legs and dragged him back. Vic seized the man by the hair and forced him to look up. He balled his free hand into a fist and he proceeded to emphasize his words with a series of shots to the face.
"Where's the money, you deadbeat prick, huh? Mario Gabali says he ain't seen your sorry ass for 3 weeks. If Mario don't get his money, I don't get my money, capiche? You wanna fucking stand me, you degenerate asshole?"
Vic's last punch broke the guy's nose, releasing a heavy gush of blood over his swollen lips. Vic let go of his hair and growled,
"No more fucking around, douchebag. Get a hold of Mario and work something out. Don't make me come looking for you."
The victim collapsed in a heap, and Victor lumbered back to the Mercedes with a vague look of disgust on his face. At least a dozen people were staring at him in open-mouthed shock, but no one dared to say anything. I should know, because I was one of them. My only coherent thought as Vic climbed behind the wheel was, holy fucking shit.
"Yes, taking care of some business,"
Vic wheezed, as he wiped a few smears of blood off of his knuckles with a McDonald's napkin. He was breathing hard, still winded from kicking another human being into multiple ruptures. He had a strange, muddy look in his eyes, like he had just awoken from a dream. It scared me.
"Let's get going, Billy. We don't want to be late, do we?"
I muttered, yeah, let's go, and dropped the remains of my second Egg McMuffin in the bag. I no longer had an appetite. I took a quick peek at the victim as we were driving away. Several people were drifting over to help him, but he shook his head and motioned for them to go away. He had tried to stand up, but his foot was dangling uselessly from his broken ankle. Poor bastard was completely fucked from head to toe. He needed an ambulance. By the time we got to the zoo, the darkness in Vic's eyes had vanished like a passing thunderstorm. He was all smiles, singing along with the radio and making random observations about the state of the world. The incident was a somber reminder that despite his outwardly cheerful demeanor, Vic was a very bad man. I'd do well to always keep that fact in mind. It might mean the difference between life and death. The rest of the week passed without incident. Donnie the dragon kept silent and stuck to his dumb lizard act. I didn't wake up to the king of the sprites, or murderous gangsters lurking in my room again, which was definitely appreciated. The only difficulty for the rest of the week was trying to convince the Thunderbird to not aggressively peck at me when I was cleaning his habitat. His name was Ross, and he was a giant, grumpy asshole of a bird. Ross looked like a cross between a buzzard and an eagle, but he stood 8 feet high and possessed a set of talons that could disembowel a cow with one swipe. Fortunately, Ross didn't possess any magical abilities, nor was he particularly intelligent. My uniform kept me safe from his claws, and the cattle prod was a good reminder to keep his distance. It quickly became evident that there would be no bonding with this foul-tempered animal, but at least he wasn't rocking my entire worldview with his explosive secrets. It was nice to deal with a creature with no hidden abilities or agendas, even if the damn thing kept trying to sneak up and bite me on the ass. When noon rolled around on Friday, Vic suggested we go visit a deli. Specifically, the deli he was talking about on Tuesday morning, right before what he referred to as the incident. Vic said,
"Come on, let's get a sandwich." He was shaking out there, Billy. "You can meet some of the guys. I told them about you. They all want to meet you."
I raised an eyebrow and asked, "Who are you talking about when you say the guys, Vic?" Vic rolled his eyes and said,
"You know, the guys."
He pushed his lumpy nose over to one side for emphasis, then added,
"They're mostly friends and associates, you know what I mean? Not exactly your average model citizens, mind you. They're all good fellas. They're like family to me. You catch my drift?"
Yeah, I get you," I answered in a listless tone. The very last thing I wanted was to meet more gangsters. I'd rather have a sleepover with the goblin, and I'm not even exaggerating. The monster in the habitat scared me, but gangsters like Vic? You're somehow much worse. The deli was close to the Little Italy district, which wasn't terribly surprising. A couple of tough-looking guys were sitting at a table on the sidewalk patio. One of them was eating a big, sloppy-looking sandwich. The other was gloomily smoking a cigarette. They both looked up as we approached, and the smoker asked,
"Hey, look who it is. Bonesaw Vic, live and in the flesh. How you doing, Victor? You look good."
Vic beamed down at him and exclaimed,
"I'm feeling good too, you know what it is? I stopped eating red meat on Wednesdays and Sundays. Only chicken and fish on those days. No exceptions. Haven't felt this good in years."
The smoker buttered his cigarette in one plate and croaked,
"That's good. I have to remember that. Hey, thanks for taking care of that thing for me the other day. I appreciate it. Situation got resolved yesterday." "No problem, Mario." Vic grinned. "It's my pleasure."
The other man put down his sandwich and asked, "Who's your long-haired sidekick over here, Victor? He looks like he's about to play me a guitar solo, this guy." The three of them had a hearty laugh at my expense. Vic slapped me on the back and said,
"Mario, Tony, this is Billy. Billy is Mario Gambale. That's Tony Andretto. Billy is the one I've been telling you about lately. He works for me."
Tony waved a hand in the air and said,
"Wait a minute, are you talking about that dealership or the other thing?" No, not the dealership." Vic snorted. "He's too good for that shithole. No, Billy's my up-and-coming star over at the other place. You know, even the Russian put in a good word for him, and that grumpy old fuck don't give a word, say to nobody."
Mario said,
"Well, pleasure to meet you, Billy. You probably already know this, but your boss over here is a huge prick."
They all laughed again, and I joined in with a cautious smile. Vic ushered me through the glass door and into a dining area that was packed full of gangsters and their associates. 15 pairs of eyes swiveled in unison and locked onto my face, all of them gleaming with hostility and suspicion. Vic boomed,
"Good afternoon, fellas. What's shaking?"
Someone called out, "I hear your Gumar's been shaking. Her can's down at the teddy bar." And there was a raucous wave of laughter. Vic grinned and threw his hands in the air.
"I can't bring nobody decent around to meet you degenerates, can I?"
Vic chuckled.
"Hey, this is Billy Whitebread. He works hard for me down at the thing. He needs a goddamn sandwich. Jackie, get this young fella pastrami on rye, would you?"
The sallow-faced old man behind the counter gave me a crisp nod and sprang into action. I looked around and saw Len sitting in a booth at the back of the room. Vinny the Pomp was crouched beside him, talking a mile a minute as he methodically devoured an enormous bagel. Len caught my eye and gave me a nod. He pointed at the empty bench seat across the table and called out,
"Over here, kid. Bring the old man with you, I guess."
Vic nudged my arm and handed me a plate that was heaped with a huge sandwich, a pickle, and a large pile of potato chips. He called back,
"I ain't no old man just yet, you big bald bastard."
I leaned over and said in a low voice,
"See, we're all family here. It's what it's all about, Billy. Just a big family having a few laughs, watching out for each other."
Vic escorted me over to Len's booth. I sat down and Vic slid his bulk into the bench beside me, crowding me against the wall with his sheer girth. As big as he was, Len dwarfed him from across the booth. Vinny the Pomp looked like a curiously weathered child beside him. Len rumbled,
"Congrats, Billy. You earned your name, kid. I'm proud of you. How you doing today, boss man?" "Good, good,"
Vic crooned contently.
"Always good over here. Vinny, this is Billy Whitebread. Billy, this is Vincenzo Pompensino. Vinny the Pomp's best goddamn lawyer in the whole state, hands down."
Vinny gave him a shocked look and exclaimed, "What, only the state? I'm the best lawyer in the whole goddamn country, Victor, and I stand by that claim." Vinny looked over at me with a perfectly neutral expression of unfamiliarity and said, "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Billy Whitebread. The pastrami sandwich in this place is better than a blowjob, I swear to God. Good choice, young man." I muttered, "Pleased to meet you," and tried my best to appear casual. Vic gripped me by the shoulder and smiled at me fondly.
"He's a good kid," he said with pride. "I ain't really choose him. So, what are you two fine gentlemen discussing just now? Just looked important?" "Me and the Pomp were just going over a few things, about the thing we discussed a while ago."
Vic nodded and said,
"Oh yeah, that thing. I remember that now. Making any headway over there?"
Vinny shrugged and said, "I think so. The thing is, with situations like this thing here, it can take a while for things to line up."
"Yeah, it ain't ever easy with a thing like that," Vic agreed. "Hey, keep me posted."
Vic lowered his voice and asked,
"Hey, you guys heard yet? Somebody's stool pigeon disappeared and everybody's losing their shit over it. The fuzz are buzzing around, harassing everyone. Nobody knows what happened. Len, make sure you guys are aware of the situation. DA's office supposed to make the next move. Now their case is dead in the water, is stuck on a can with pants around their ankles. No toilet paper in sight. They're pissed right now." That's too bad,"
Len said mildly, and they all burst into laughter. Len gave me an almost imperceptible look, and I twitched my finger on the table as a sign of acknowledgement. Vic still didn't know about the situation with Vince, and I needed it to stay that way if I wanted to continue drawing breath. We spent the rest of our extended lunchtime shooting the shit and having a laugh. I was introduced to a number of hardened criminals who came over to pay their respects to Victor, men with names like Jimmy Hardball and Ronaldo the Noose. Around 2 o'clock, we said our goodbyes and went our separate ways. Vic drove us back to the zoo with a smile on his face. He clearly loved his gang of outlaws in his own selfish, narcissistic way. They were a family that he could control, close friends who had no choice but to do his bidding. It was wholesome and completely twisted at the same time. He dropped me off beside my car and said,
"Now why don't you go home for the day? Ain't much left to do. Truth be told, we need a few more displays in the aviary wing. I gotta get on the field crew to get out there. Find me some with wing."
I asked, What's the field crew? Are they the ones who capture the exhibits in the wild? Victor groaned.
Nah, don't call it capturing, okay? Especially not around the guests. Sounds bad. I like to refer to it as, procuring. Sounds a lot nicer. Yeah, that's what they do. If you think the caretakers are a bunch of hard asses, you should meet the field crew. They're a different breed, those people.
I thanked him for lunch. I drove home with a full belly and a blank mind. I decided to take an afternoon nap and flicked on the TV for background noise. As I was starting to drift off, I was startled awake by a news update. Someone found a body in the trunk of an abandoned car. The victim was identified as Bobby the bricklayer Antonio, a career criminal who had been known to be an associate of the mafia. They briefly showed the dead man's picture on the screen, an old mugshot. I felt my heart freeze in my chest. I recognized his face immediately. It was the guy Vic had pummeled in the McDonald's parking lot. In my head, I heard Vic say, "We're all family here." And I wondered about the nature of the so-called family that would kill each other so casually. I got up and I paced around the apartment for a while. I was restless, but I felt too paranoid to go out for a walk. Anyone could see me out there. They could follow me around, watch me without being detected. They could scoop me up and spirit me away, and nobody would ever know what happened. There was a knock on the door, and I answered it with my kitchen knife behind my back. To my surprise, my unexpected visitor was Len.
Can I come in?
He asked.
I think we should talk.
I pasted a surprised look on my face and exclaimed, "Wow, this is new. You're asking to come in instead of just pie-facing me and forcing your way in?" Len grimaced and then gently pushed me aside with his fingertips. He said,
"No need for the sarcasm, kid. I'm trying to be polite. I'm not very good at it. Look, just get the fuck out of the way and let me in. We gotta talk."
Len settled himself down on my couch and looked around approvingly. He said,
"That's much better. Keep it tidy, keep it clean. Makes life a lot easier, don't it?"
Reluctantly, I nodded my head and agreed. Len folded his arms in his lap and let out a deep breath. He said,
"Victor likes you. I think he has plans for you. He don't want you knocking around the zoo forever. He wants you out there, earning your keep."
He sat down across from Len and said, "What, you mean he wants me out there doing gangster stuff? I'm no tough guy, Len. I think that's obvious."
"We got plenty of tough guys already. What we need is someone with brains and insight. And that's you, kid. But here's the problem. I got a feeling you're up to something. I don't know what it is yet. But when I get a feeling like this, I'm usually right."
I felt the blood drain from my face, and I started to vigorously deny any wrongdoing. Len held up his hand and snapped,
"Just can it for a second, Dumbo. Okay, just listen to me, okay? If I'm getting this feeling about you, it won't be long before Vic does too. He's too happy with you right now to listen to his instincts. But that won't last forever. If he starts sending out feelers, he'll eventually find out about the thing with the hippie. Me, I'll be okay. I'm a made guy. Nobody's gonna touch me without the go-ahead from the commission. And frankly, I did everyone a favor by getting rid of the snitch. You, however, it's a whole different situation. You ain't nobody important. You are drawing heat, and Vic likes to stay cool. If you get my drift. Don't matter if you didn't know about the snitching. You're involved. You know too much."
"Well, that isn't exactly new information," I grumbled. "I'm painfully aware of that. Thank you very much."
"Don't be a smartass," Len rumbled. "I'm trying to tell you point blank that I know you're cooking up some harebrained scheme. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm aware of it. You gotta understand something here, okay? If Vic puts your name on a piece of paper, I'm the one who's gonna take the job. Keeping an eye on you is my personal assignment, dickhead. That means I gotta keep you out of trouble. It also means I gotta take care of things if you become the trouble. Do you follow me, Billy? I like you, I really do. You might be a goofy little fuckhead, but I like you anyway. But if I get the call,
I'll strangle you with a piece of piano wire and bury you in the woods, full stop. I'll have to do it, kid. It's my job. Len leaned forward with his massive hands laced together tightly and breathed. Don't make me do that to you, Billy. I don't need the blood of another innocent person on my hands. We stared at each other in silence for a few seconds. When I opened my mouth to speak, Len shushed me and stood up to leave. Don't say anything more about it, kid. Just forget whatever dumb shit scheme you got cooking upstairs. Go with the flow. Ask for a raise or something. Take some of that money you've earned. Have a wild night at a strip club. Ditch that shitty car. Get yourself some respectable wheels. You earned it. Len paused at the door and looked back with a grave expression on his broad, scarred-up face. He added, You gotta understand, kid. I'll kill you. I'd have no other choice. He walked out of my apartment without another word. I slowly closed the door behind him and put the kitchen knife back in the utensil drawer. It was dull as shit anyway. I needed to buy a new whetstone. Hell, why bother? I could just contact the guys who offered me a job selling steak knives and buy an entire set, complete with a chopping block and a lifetime guarantee. I had $4,000 sitting in my bank account and another $2,000 in a box under my bed. By my standards, I was rich as hell. My newfound wealth came with a heavy cost of its own, didn't it? I was stuck between my own mortality, my fear of being murdered, and my desire to never be poor again for the rest of my life. Somewhere outside of this three-pointed dilemma, there was yet another factor. I genuinely liked most of the entities who populated this crazy, confusing new world I lived in. I liked the prisoners, but I also liked the people who ran the prison. More than that, I'd found a place where I belong, and that's almost as important as having enough money. Not quite, but definitely up there. Taking everything into consideration, I really did choose a terrible time to quit smoking pot. The cigarettes were just not cutting it. If I didn't find some kind of outlet for the bad feelings soon, I was gonna lose my shit and implode in a spectacular fashion. And that wouldn't help anyone, would it? I decided it was time I find myself a hobby. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I want to tell you thanks so much for watching tonight's video or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast if you happen to be listening to this as a podcast, or as a YouTube, or however else you managed to have found this story for tonight. And as always, I would love to give a big thank you to everyone who's supporting me over on Patreon. You guys are the real MVPs. You guys keep things going, especially while things have been nuts for me over the past couple of months, and things have been getting crazier and crazier as time goes on. You guys are the ones who are keeping me sane, and I mean that with all sincerity, that you guys have helped me immensely. So, in my personal life and my professional life, I want to give a very big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Jakob Fenske, Burnett, Kraus, LaQueda, Canizales, MrCreepyPasta, PebisPleaser, Travis, Joseph Calarrudo, BuddhaBee, Dante, Kinkade, Foxhound 803, Mephistopheles, CursepoxPrimarch, Bastion, Beefcake, Jeff the Killer's Cultist, Love You M&M, INSANITYGamerX, Jesus Cornejo, Yargul, Amber Clark, Jay Kearns, Himbo Jerry, Samahai, Crusader Chocobo, Adamarius, Captain Scurvy, Escabine, Braden Morris, Nate Cull, Our Min Sect Time, Angelus, Seclude, That Creepy Chick, Red Shadow Cat, Xavier and Cheyenne, 6 Gay Rats in a Trench Coat, Turtle Man, Cryolinium, Lord Life's Best, Gorang Tron Magazine, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Michael Limchok, Dirt Diver 030, Matt Bach, Voice of Sam, Shelly J, Fikamel, Deleted Account, Melted Lake, Tully Sue, William King, Sashi Suzaku, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Hades Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Mog, Kiwi the Sloth, Fester's Lampshade, Nico Kaya, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Paulson, and Corey Kenshin. To everyone on this list, everyone in the description, and of course anyone who could support even just $1, thank you all so much for making my life significantly easier with this. And if you guys would like to be able to join any of the names that you see here or down there or anything at all, head over to patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. And with that, I wish you all a very, very pleasant night and sweet dreams.